Okay, hold on a second while I find my we're going to call the meeting to order. This is the September the 24th meeting of the City of San Diego Commission on Police Practices ad hoc committee on transition planning. I'm Doug Case. I am the chair of the committee and first vice chair of the commission. Members present are Diana Dent, member of the committee, Patrick Anderson, a member of the committee, Kate Yavendetti, who is our liaison to San Diegans for Justice, Charmaine Mosley, our interim executive director, Elena Conde, our executive assistant, and then we have Jocelyn Maggard from the Department of Finance. So let me see, do we have a quorum for voting? So we have members of the committee are me, Patrick, Diana, Joe.
It should be.
Yeah, we do, but we only have 3 voting members here, but it actually is a quorum. And I think they were the same members last time because we kind of postponed things because people weren't here, but they're not here again. So we'll go ahead and finalize those decisions. Let me see if I can find where I had my oh, okay. Do you want me to share the agenda or?
Yeah, if you can just share it in the beginning, that'll be great, just for the public. You can probably just scroll down.
Okay, and so hold on a second. Let me go to share screen. Okay. And so here's the agenda. Did we receive any public comment?
No public comment received.
Okay. Updates in terms of the budget process, nothing new there, although we'll discuss that when we get down to the legal counsel contract. Staffing, nothing new. And unfortunately, we didn't have anything new with regard to the funding options for the executive search position for the deputy executive director. Charmaine requested a meeting to discuss that, and we haven't gotten a response to that yet. As you mentioned last week, as long as the amount is under $25,000, we probably can do it without an RFP. And so we thought that would be the best direction to go, and wanted to know if the city has executive search service firms that are on a list that we could use. And anyway, that's what the purpose of the meeting was. And so we really can't proceed until we get that done. Implementation ordinance and permanent standard operating procedures, nothing new there, except that the city council apparently approved a outside counsel to write the second draft of the implementation ordinance, and also will be responsible for drafting the protect ordinance. Kate, what is the name of the firm?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, and I don't know how to pull up an email when I'm on Zoom, but I sent it to you and I sent it to Patrick. I didn't send it to the whole committee because I didn't have everybody's email.
I can pull it up if you'll give me just a moment.
Okay, thanks, Patrick.
But go ahead, Kate.
And I did have some questions about it because they seem to be based in in the Bay Area, but there's also a local address. And so I have a number of questions about all of that, like who is really doing this, number one. Number two, I think it's a committee question, is can the committee directly communicate with that person about your recommendations? Or does it still have to go through D4, the city council? And
I think it has to go through D4 because they'll be, well, technically they are the outside counsel for the city attorney's office, because the city attorney's office is the office responsible for writing it, but they're serving D4 as their client.
is it D4 or the whole city council? Do you know?
I don't know. I know that their direction is to work with D4, and I think that's what the motion actually said. And so it is, if I recall correctly, when they considered the first draft, it included directing the city attorney to work with D4 or to work with the chair of the PSNLN. So I think we have to go through D4.
Okay.
The next issue of office space, we mentioned last time that we got a quote of $40-some thousand, I forget the exact amount, for IT, which kind of shocked us because we weren't expecting that. And it turns out that
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the name of the firm is Myers, Nair, Roebuck, Silver, and Wilson, and they're based in Alameda.
Okay. I just got a text. Let me see if it's anybody trying to get into the meeting or something. Nope. It's about a clearance sale. Yeah, and they go by a shorter name. I forget what it was. I looked them up on the web, and they're an award-winning firm. But beyond that, I really can't tell you a lot about them. They do have a large. They have a very diversified firm, both in terms of women and ethnicity and so forth. But in terms of their specialty, it was hard to really tell from reading what was on the web.
Just a quick question. They were hired by the city council or by D4? Who's the firm?
I don't know what the process was for selecting it. I think technically it was hired by the city attorney because they're serving as outside counsel for the city attorney's office, but I believe that D4 was involved in the selection, but I don't know what the process is. And oh, it looks like maybe Henry is here. We haven't, no, never forget that. So I don't know what the process was.
Can I just add something? And that is, we didn't even find out until after the fact that it was on the agenda for the city council, because, I mean, maybe you guys do, but we always check the PSNLN agenda and thought it would be on their agenda, but in fact, it went straight to the city council on Monday, and then we heard about it after the fact. So no one, hold on just a second. I'm sorry, I've got a delivery coming in.
Oh, somebody has their hand raised. Oh, that was Kate.
That was me. So, so what I can tell you is that we will be doing our research to find out more about this firm, and we'll try to find out who the individual is who will be responsible for drafting the ordinance. And we'll probably, I'll get back to you, but we just got this information, and, you know, quite frankly, feel a little, and I think you guys do too, a little out of the loop that you didn't even know that it was going to be on the agenda, and we had no opportunity to research this or have any comment before the selection was made. So trust us. We will be doing some research and get back to you.
Okay, then move on to office space. Anyway, as a result of that, well, maybe not as a result of that. Well, I guess it was a result of that. The real estate assets department looked at other options and came up with an option that looks like it will actually work fairly well, and that is that the space is going to be available actually in the same suite where Charmaine currently is, and about the same size, and it already as what would in 750B, and it already has all of the city IT infrastructure, so we wouldn't have to pay for that. And Brandon and Charmaine and I are going to take a look at it next week. Well, Charmaine's pretty familiar with it. But it looks like it's going to be very workable. And it also has the advantage of being next to City Hall. This is the 9th floor of the Civic Plaza building. Is that the name of it, Charmaine?
Yes.
Anyway, so it looks like that's the direction we're going to be going. We'll have a report next week because we're going to be looking at it on Thursday afternoon. Nothing new in terms of standing rules. Anything new in terms of community outreach? Patrick?
Sorry, I had to replace my laptop, and so this is the first day I'm actually using it, and it's a bit confusing for me. The only new thing is that I just want to join Kate's perplexed epiphany after the fact that the firm had already been hired. I will be doing a panel to give updates on the transition with a number of local groups, including Women Occupy Mid-City Can a few weeks from now. But that's the only update.
Okay. And then in terms of the legal counsel contract, there's 2 parts there. The first part is, or the second part, which we'll discuss first, is the selection process for the our new outside counsel, and the RFP deadline is today. Charmaine reached out to try to set up a meeting to talk about the process of selection, and we got back she got back an email which essentially said that they can't meet until we have a selection committee confirmed. And then Brandon wrote and said, well, how do we confirm the selection committee, which is going to be me and Brandon and Kate, and don't have a response to that. And so hopefully we can get that meeting set up soon. Somebody said something.
Yes, let me just add that I did forward the names of the evaluation panel to purchasing and contracting, so they do have the names.
And that was before we got that email, right?
I think it was after.
Okay.
You can find it was after.
Anyway, and so the RFP deadline is today, and so hopefully we can get that meeting set up ASAP so we can begin reviewing the contracts and get the person selected because we're running out of money, as we'll talk about in the first part of the contract. And the other item is the contract for our current outside counsel, Christina. And remind me again, Charmaine, what's the name of the firm?
Devaney, Pate, Morris, and Cameron.
Okay. And as you'll recall, we went over budget last year, and so it required a resolution of the city council in order to be able to pay the amount that we went over in the fiscal year that ended on June 30th. And then we were able to renew the contract, but only for $25,000, which is why we're going out to bid for a new outside counsel. Well, the resolution that passed says, be it resolved that the city council approves and authorizes the mayor or designate to execute the 3rd amendment to the contract. The previous amendments were for, the prior years to the contract, to retroactively increase the contract amount for fiscal year 2021 from $25,000 to $28,985 and to replace references to CRB throughout the contract with the name of the commission, and to approve a contract amount not to exceed $25,000 for the fiscal year 2022. The question that we have is that we were told by the Department of Finance that even though they retroactively approved that amount for the fiscal year 2021 contract, that it has to be paid out of our fiscal year 2022 budget, which would then decrease the amount that we have available for legal counsel in the upcoming year. So we wanted to have somebody from the Department of Finance explain that and answer questions. And we have Jocelyn Maggard, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, to explain that to us.
Actually, you did a great job with my last name. So let me share my screen. I have just like a very kind of rough table here, and just to kind of give a picture or snapshot of what's going on monetarily versus the contract. So let's see, I haven't done Zoom in a long time. We use Teams.
Green button.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So I'm going to go here to my screen too. So are you guys seeing a blue and white table?
Yeah.
Not yet. You clicked on the green.
Oh, I didn't do share yet. Okay. There it is.
There you go. Yes.
Okay. So
Are you able to make it a little bit bigger?
I can. Here, let's make it. I think I can even go a little bit bigger. Is that good enough?
That's good enough.
Okay. So I'm going to start here with your contract here in row 2. And then I have it set up B and C to have the FY21 amounts and the FY22 amounts. So what the contract did was legally allow to incur costs in fiscal year 2021 of $28,985. And in fiscal year 2022, you can incur a cost from this vendor for $25,000. So that makes a total of the 2 years, the $53,985, which is stated in the contract that the CFO can spend that much money within those 2 years. But the contract itself does not dictate the budget or how much money is appropriated in the budget, unless it's an appropriations budget. So then row 4, so your budget in FY21 remained at $25,000, and your budget, technically your budget in FY22 is $180,000 for legal services, but the contract stipulates it at $25,000. So you have this total. So in actuality, what can be spent over these 2 years is $50,000, even though the contract allows for the incurrence, to incur the fees of $53,985. Does that make sense?
Let me clarify. And so this year we have budgeted $25,000 plus $55,000.
That leaves you 100. So yeah, this 25 here leaves you 155 of your 180.
Okay, and so the amount that is over, which is what, 3,985, will need to come out of the 155. Is that what?
So let me get down a little bit further. So you guys pay, so the paid expenses, your actuals in FY21, so here in row 8, you guys paid DPMC $23,072. So that left an unspent budget of $1,928. So because that was left in the FY21 budget unspent, and it was not carried over, it's not available anymore. So unencumbered balances of an appropriation close at the end of the fiscal year, typically around 60 days. afterwards. And so the budget variance that still has to be paid is $5,913. And yet, and that does, the only budget you have available to pay that with at this time is $25,000 out of the FY22 budget. However, that doesn't mean that if you use that from your $25,000 budget and when you go to do your RFP, you are not tied to only having 155,000 left of the 180, because we can do budget modifications from other parts of your budget that you think where we anticipate having savings, or twice a year. So during like the regular budget process that goes into effect at the end of the fiscal year, we holistically look at the general fund and appropriate funds. Then we do that a second time in the mid-year, which happens around December. So it is possible that you guys can request more budget at the mid-year because I know you guys weren't expecting to spend this 6,000 out of your 25,000. So it can be, covered.
So the $6,000 has to come out of the 25,000 and it can't come out of the 155.
Yes. Well, it does. It's not that that's all one big pot of money. Let's call it 180,000.
Mm-hmm.
But you have 25,000 that by the contract can be paid to DPMC. And this is a cost that has to go to DPMC. So yes, it does have to go out of that 25,000 because that money is selected to go to that vendor.
Okay, so for July
Wait,
1 going.
Doug, can I ask a clarifying question?
Go ahead.
So thank you, Jocelyn. This is really helpful and frustrating for those of us who don't work in city government.
Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, I thought,
and I know what happened too is that you guys, like there was kind of a thought of that the extra money that was incurred was also going to be added to the budget, which it wasn't. So that we can.
Yeah.
So I know that now is created a kind of trying to figure out, okay, where does this all add up?
Yeah, I mean, I work at UCSD and we,
Mm-hmm.
So I work with public funds, but carry forwards are permitted and also overages are handled very differently.
Mm-hmm.
My question is this. So because the contract limits how much of the $180,000 we can spend, what happens if the contract, I'm imagining a kind of doomsday scenario.
Sure.
Let's if the contract isn't increased, then in 1 year's time, that $180,000 will revert to the funding source because of the rule listed by the asterisk. Is that true? Is that a possibility?
Yeah. So typically, especially you guys are working from the general fund. So the fund that covers almost everything. So the city doesn't typically leave that out, to move ahead, because if it's unspent, that could be used to cover libraries and parks, and they don't want to encumber money that could go towards so many other city services. So yes, if 180,000 or really any of your budget isn't spent by June, within 60 days after the June 30 deadline, it does go back to the general fund. We can request carry forward. It can be done, but it's typically, especially for let's use this FY21 amount, $1,900. That it's maybe not likely that gets carried forward because it's such a small amount. It's more capital capital projects get carried forward because they're multi-year projects. And then if say, you know, like an COVID would be kind of an extenuating circumstance where sometimes, you know, things were just not even able to be done. And so a budget might be left with $1 million. And
Okay,
we
so-
would carry that forward.
So we're sitting here at the end of September, which
Mhm.
means we have about 9 months to spend this 180,000 that we can't legally spend yet because of these various budgeting rules. Would you recommend that we prioritize getting contracts? And I know I'm thinking a couple steps forward
Yeah.
here, but getting contracts in place to be able to spend that money, which would require us, Kate, and I'm looking at your little image on the screen, because of how that money was imagined, we need to get a legal analyst at least temporarily in place and contracted so we can spend that money. Because the last thing we want to do is have city council look at our budget and say, well, see, you didn't spend that money. And so you don't seem to really need it. So we're going to start reducing it until you max it out. Is my thinking here?
Yeah, it's not incorrect necessarily. You know, I think that's even like a fairly standard kind of, you know, you think of like, especially with government funds, use it or lose it sort of thing. And it is, once you go over those, once you hit that 25,000 mark, that does make contracting more complicated. And that's probably why you guys have done more of these contracts at the $25,000 rate, but especially for legal costs, that doesn't take you very far.
No. And I should note there's a shift here in what this allocation is, or what this allocation is. A model from a contracted, you know, sort of advisory ad hoc legal analyst and a permanent legal analyst, someone who's actually affixed to the commission. So I'm just taking note that we have 9 months to get a contract in place of some sort, even if it's temporary, for a temporary appointment, to spend this $180,000.
That's what we're
Okay.
doing. I mean, that's what we're doing right now with the RFP, is we're trying to, you know, if we're able to get the RFP approved, I mean, selected expeditiously, we won't be, it should make much of a difference. But I guess going back to my previous question, so it sounds like for the current fiscal year, which began July 1, the amount of money that we have that we can spend with the contract with our current vendor is $25,000 minus roughly $6,000, which is $16,000. Is that correct?
Yes. So let's see.
And we've already expended some of that.
Yeah. So you have 18,813 left of your 25 after you pay off all the bills that you have incurred for DPMC at the current moment. So because together you have.
I think we have some additional bills that have not been submitted.
That's incorrect. We had at least 3 invoices, and those 3 invoices which included the last fiscal year's invoice totals like 12,000 something. So with the many conversations that I've had between PNC and DOF, once we found out that we went over the maximum amount, you know, it took a lot of time trying to understand this process. So I appreciate, you know, you explaining, you know, the various steps to me, a new person with this budget, you know, budget process within the city. So thank you for doing that. I know in the resolution, there's a part of the resolution that authorizes the CFO to expend an amount not to exceed 53,985. So if you can explain that portion of it, that would be great, because it says not to exceed that portion for fiscal year 2021 and 2022.
Right.
And then they mentioned certificates, which I'm not sure what the certificates entail, but it looks like it says furnishes 1 or more certificates that funds necessary for expenditure are or will be on deposit with the city treasurer.
Okay.
So that's part of the resolution.
So real quick, I'm going to address the two invoices because I think I do have those here. So the two invoice I put in based on the invoice, the three invoice amounts that you sent to me, this 5,913 is what's outstanding from that you incurred in FY21, and this 6188 is what's outstanding from FY22. So that's where that's how I calculated this number. I subtracted these two from 25,000. So you do have $18,813 left after you pay those three invoices, unless there's any more invoices that you didn't make me aware of.
I'm just trying to do the math.
Sure.
Okay, and
So
so,
just, yeah, FYI, or so you guys have, that's why I had made that one blue. And then, so, okay, to go back to not to exceed 50. So what the council is doing in the reso and like what they have to do, you know, organizationally is they have to say, CFO, you can spend this much money. And so they allowed, and that's the thing with a contract is you can spend this much money, but that doesn't mean you have this much money to spend. They don't, the contract and the budget aren't necessarily matching. So, or they don't pair together perfectly, if that kind of helps it make sense. So you can, the resolution is allowing the CFO to spend that much money, $53,985 over the course of 2 fiscal years in either FY or in FY21 and FY22. Does that answer that question? Or was there a second part to it?
And I know there was a 60-day time limit that was there, which I was never told of. So if there was that $1,900 that was left over, why couldn't we have just, when the invoices were incurred, why couldn't we have just used that money?
You could have
budgeted. It was budgeted. You
could have paid $1,900 or $1,928 to the vendor during at the end of the fiscal year, and then just, you know, it wouldn't have covered your whole the whole cost of the invoice, but you could have paid that to them before the budget closed.
okay, any other questions? Well, thank you
so much, Jocelyn.
Thank you for coming.
This has been really helpful.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. And yeah, just shoot me an email if you guys have any questions.
And if you can click on the red button at the top of your screen, says stop sharing.
Sure thing. Let me get back to, oh, there we go.
Perfect. Okay.
All right. Have a good rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And so let me go back to my screen, and I want to share. Well, actually, I may just have Patrick share his screen if you can. But let me get my agenda first, though. Make sure.
Yeah, just give me a minute and I'll share it.
The next item is the
and did everyone receive the updated version I sent after?
Why don't you put that on the screen?
Yeah, just give me a minute here.
And we discussed this last week and came to a consensus, but we wanted to spend some time looking at the actual wording, and then what we were hoping to have a greater number of people here today, but we have about the same number. So and we're also hoping to have Henry here, but he's not here.
Okay, share screen. So I don't appear to be able to share because I'm still setting this laptop up. as I
I think
said.
we have to make you a co-host.
No, I have the share screen button, but again, this is a computer that's less than 12 hours old, so I will, I don't know what.
Why
Give
don't
me
you,
a moment. Just give me a moment. Hold on. I'm gonna put the Word document in the chat, and if one of you could open it up and share it.
well, if it's in the chat, everybody can open then, right?
Yeah, but it's taking me a minute to get it there, so hang on just one sec. All right, there we go. Put it there. There you go. So everybody can just open that up. The only thing I did after our discussion, are you not seeing it?
I don't see it.
It says I sent it to host and panelists.
Can you email it? Maybe to me or Alina, and then we can just open it and share it.
Okay.
So it's those damn Apple computers.
Doug,
Stop.
shut it. Sorry, I'm not holding back this morning. I've had 48 hours of trying at the start of the academic year, trying to start, trying to deal with no computer. Can you all just look in your email and see? Oh wait, here we go. Desktop.
Did you
Oh,
send
this
it
is.
before? Did you
I
send it?
did. I sent it last week, but here we go. I got it. Hang on. Ordinance. There we go. Choose file. And it's going to both of you. Boy, this is city government at its best. Efficiency. Nobody's laughing at that, but I found it hilarious.
Did you get it? Did you get it, Charmaine?
Got it. Let me try to.
I sent it to Charmaine and Alina.
Yeah, I just got it as well.
Okay, so Charmaine, you can share it. And we have the same people here this week as last week, right?
Yeah, and so the only reason we waited to vote is because we thought Brandon and Joe might be here to vote. And I think Doug, you thought it would be better to have a larger quorum, but this is the only thing I did was reformat this, move last week's draft down, and then highlight the edits we made together last week, including Diana's I think really important suggestion. Charmaine, if you could scroll down just slightly. Yeah, so we had borrowed language from the state certification bill, SB2. And Diana wanted us to actually borrow from the city of Davis Police Accountability Commission, which is what we ended up working out under under proposed replacement. So the most recent version at the top of the screen right now, if you look at number 2, that begins who have prior adverse interactions with law enforcement and or who are family members of individuals with prior adverse interactions. So this is, I mean, we all said we felt felt good about this last week, and that's all.
Okay. Anyway, so unfortunately, the people who weren't here last week aren't here again this week. So I think we should go ahead and approve it, unless there's any other further discussion. And not seeing any. Maybe want to make a motion to approve this.
I'll make the motion.
And Diana, do you want to second it?
Second it.
Okay, and then I think we can, well, the only voting members are me, Patrick, and Diana. So Patrick, I assume you're in favor?
I'm going to abstain. Just kidding.
The
Yes.
roll- We have to do the roll call.
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing a roll call.
Okay.
Patrick and then Diana
Yes,
and myself, I'll vote yes, since the chair can vote in ad hoc committee or in committees. And so we have,
Excellent.
and then, and if you can, Alina, attach this to the notes of this week's meeting.
Will do. Yes.
Okay, and then we'll move on to, and so if you can stop sharing, Charmaine. And then let me share again. And there was a mistake in last week's notes, which I didn't catch till this morning when I was preparing for the meeting. So it's not Elena's fault, it was my fault for not catching it. The issue was the timelines for the police department to respond with a substantive response. Our initial proposal was 14 days for findings and discipline and 30 days for policy recommendations. We noticed that the voters ordinance had 10 days for the first and 60 days for the latter. And so last week we decided to recommend 14 days, keep it at 14 days for findings and discipline, but increase it to 60 days for policy recommendations. So I think we had it backwards in the notes, but that's what, as I recall, we decided to do. And once again, we were going to wait until this week. And so I'll go ahead and take the vote on that. So the issue, so actually I guess the change would be to change our, well, I guess to be clear, why don't we just restate it? And so the recommendation is that for findings and discipline, we would request a substantive response from the police department within 14 days. And for policy recommendations, we would expect a substantive response from the police department within 60 days. And so can I get a motion and second on that?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, so we can go and vote on that. Patrick,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes,
and I'll vote yes. And so that's approved. And now we can go on to our next item, which has been a troublesome item for the current commission. And that is the deadline for the police department to transmit cases to CPP for review in consideration of the POBAR deadline. I think everybody here understands what the issue is. We need to discuss what the solution is. Do we want to require that the police department give us cases within a certain number, so that we have a minimum certain number of days to consider it? Any thoughts on how to proceed?
I have thoughts. I have lots of thoughts. I have complex, rich, and frankly, quite sassy thoughts. But no, I mean, to treat this with the seriousness it deserves. Yes, I think we need deadlines for both items D and E. I know we're on D right now, but I also think that this is a much more complex issue than D suggests, because you know, I'm not talking about any particular case, but I think we have all seen how the reality that a case may be released to CPP and then pulled back and then released again and then pulled back, and a simple deadline of you know, let's say there were a 6-month deadline or a 3-month deadline from the date of complaint to the date that we receive either the full investigation or an update. You know, that deadline doesn't take into consideration the fact that IA, after releasing a case to us, can always pull it back well beyond that 6-month deadline. And so as not to violate any restrictions or requirements of confidentiality. I'm not talking about any particular case. I'm just thinking about how this might work. So I think I think the full commission, and I think city council has to take this seriously. And I don't think it can be a simple deadline. I think there are ways around this that are already available and would continue to be available. So I would suggest that we do some research on other strong models of oversight bodies to see how they structure their timelines and to see if they've collected data on whether or not those timelines have worked.
Yeah, but
And I am not volunteering myself for such research. Our academic year is just starting, but I don't think a simple deadline is going to be strong enough here.
well, it would need to be other review agencies or agencies that have a review function.
That's, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
In the state of California, because that's what we're looking at is POBAR. But let me play devil's advocate with you. What if we put a deadline of say 90 days with a ability for the department to request an extension in extraordinary circumstances?
Well, so first of all, I don't think that responds to my bigger concern, which is what happens if they meet the 90-day threshold, but then they pull the case again? Do they get another 90 days? But in terms of
Well, see, I would say that they don't, but we could word it that way.
But I think we have to be very clear about that, because again, not speaking about any particular cases. But I think the voters ordinance includes some very strong language about structured requirements if they don't meet the 90 days. So if they don't meet the 90 days, they have to convey in writing why they're not. And I believe that's CC'd to the mayor and the chief, but I'm not sure about that. And then I think there's something about, every so many days, they have to report back.
Yeah, see, that wasn't what I was suggesting. I was suggesting that they have to give it to us so that we have 90 days. Theirs, I thought, frankly,
That's
was
not enough.
3 months is not enough to.
No. No, especially not if they say, for example, that they need 60 days to send out discipline letters. That gives us a month. I think there needs to be, from the moment the complaint is made.
No, what I was saying, giving us 90 days. So if they need 60 days, it would have to be 150 days. You see what I'm saying? So that we would have 3 months to review a case, and if they needed it 2 months after that to do the discipline, that we would then need it. Let me do my math correctly, but it's so we need 90 days plus 60. Yeah, so 150 days prior to the POBAR deadline is when they would need to submit the case to us.
Can I ask, what is in the procedures for the complaint process? And I also put in the chat that we're going to have Internal Affairs come in at the Commission's October meeting to talk about the complaint process as well as Blue Team. So this is a timely conversation.
And can I also ask a question? Can you explain to me what the pullback is all about? Like, if you get a case, do you start working on it and then IA says, oh no, you can't work on it anymore because we're explain why that happens?
So
Not
it it might happen, for example, that IA releases its report to the team that's been assigned to review it. And one of two or more things might happen. First of all, after an initial review, a team might go back to IA and say, we are going to disagree with various things, or we don't have evidence that we need. There's something missing from the file. Or Internal Affairs might, after releasing its report, find other information or receive other guidance from legal, from a subject matter expert, et cetera, and pull the case to redo the investigation. Or in response to the team's initial response, IA might pull the case to redo some of the findings, often in agreement with the team. Well, I shouldn't say often, sometimes in agreement with the team, sometimes to sort of bolster a particular finding. When it pulls the case, the team's work is put on hold, because what the team is then waiting for is the final investigatory report. Does that make sense, Kate? So IA can pull a report to redo it, or any part of it, and then re-release it. But when it pulls the case, the team stops working until it gets the revised version.
And more often than not, it's fairly rare that the other thing happens. Most often it's they take a case back because of feedback from the team, either because we've convinced them to add a finding or change a finding, or sometimes they want to add information to better clarify their finding. But most often it's because of our feedback that they want to take it back. But that's a good.
So how does this issue fit in with having an independent investigator? Or are you talking about having this as some sort of an interim deadline issue? And how? Okay.
This is just for the review process, not for independent investigations.
Okay.
Independent investigations, I think we don't wait for IA. We begin the investigation as soon as we get the complaint, is my understanding.
So this is for complaints that are not being independently investigated by CPP's investigators.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we have to also keep in mind when they pull those cases back, it has to, sometimes they consult with legal, which adds on an additional time to the whole process.
Right. So as Patrick indicated, it's complex, but we need to come up with a solution. I have problems with the solution or with the proposal in the voters ordinance. I think that it's too restrictive on IA to have to come back every month to request an extension or whatever. But maybe we ought to look at that and perhaps look at it from that point of view, maybe revise, make some revisions to the voters ordinance, or people like the voters ordinance. Maybe we can take that approach. Patrick
Doug,
indicated he needs to sign off, and that's going to put us down to 3 people. So my suggestion is that we stop there for the day, but give a homework assignment to everybody to look at the voters ordinance to see how they address the issue of how much time, well, the time limit or time requirement for giving a case to the CPP to review, and think it over, and maybe we can solve this complex issue next week.
Can I just have another question before we close? And that is how frequently or at all has this issue run up against the POBOR statute of limitations, so that the CPP or the CRB has really not been able to complete the process?
It happened. It's been with increasing frequency, and so I think in the past few months, and Charmaine maybe can give me, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we maybe have had half a dozen cases where the the case went out for discipline before CPP had a chance to review it so that they can meet their
So-
deadline.
Yeah, so we should also add that the CPP has had an abundance of cases. We've had like at least up to 80 active cases right now, which is something that we've never seen before. And with that said, we've also had limited commissioners that are actually reviewing cases right now. So everything combined is causing this issue when it reaches the end of the process, because you have internal affairs that's giving warnings to the teams. You know, they have 60 days, they have 90 days to get these cases done before internal affairs gives out the sustained findings. However, depending on what the team's caseload is, sometimes the teams can't get those cases done within that time frame. So internal affairs will go ahead and issue the discipline, especially if it's more than one officer that's involved, because they want to make sure that the discipline is given to the officer. However, the team still is reviewing that case, but it's going to go beyond that 1 year time frame.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Kate, we still go ahead and complete the review, even if the discipline is already done. But if we end up with a disagreement or suggest a sustained finding, there's nothing that can be done about it. And I think we actually had one case where that was a situation. You know, and part of this is, you know, the current situation, brought on by COVID and the increased number of cases with the backlog. You know, the new commission may want to look at other ways of streamlining the review process so that it's not as time intensive and so forth. And we can take that into consideration. But regardless, I think that the issue still remains that there needs to be enough time built in either the ordinance or the operating procedures so that there's a guarantee that the CPP will be able to review a case prior to it being sent out for, or prior to the deadline for being sent out to discipline.
And so my other question, I know everybody wants to leave and so do I, is that now that there's a new council who's doing a redraft of the ordinance and presumably using the city attorney's draft as their base, is what D4 told us. And there's still a lot of issues that the transition committee is talking about. So I'm just sort of wondering if issues that we're discussing at this point will really not even make it into the ordinance or not get, I'm just wondering if, I'm just concerned about timing. And I mean, I understand the thing that we voted on first, Patrick's thing, is part of the ordinance. I don't know about whether the deadlines would be, I know that they're in the voters ordinance, but I don't know that they're going to be in the new draft, and would then they be in the standard operating procedures? I mean, I guess really bottom line, what I'm concerned about, and you know, this is just me, it's not just me, is that we're doing a lot of work and putting a lot of thought into this, and it's really not going to be considered particularly from what I'm hearing.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that, because some of our concerns, well, maybe by D4, but we're meeting with all of the members of PSNLN and eventually all the members of the city council, and with
well, and we don't know the timeline for the new council either. I mean, if new council comes up with a draft, we obviously still have time to object to that.
You know, but I think our intent is to give you know, some of the solutions that we think are better, are solutions to the issues we raised, to send that to PSNLN. There's no guarantee that they will accept those, but you know, I think that's what our task is, right, to try to come up with the commission's recommendations. And I think they'll be considered. We don't have any guarantee that we're not in the driver's seat. We are we're the backseat driver, if you will. I'm not sure what the proper analogy is. It's a good question, but I do think that even though we're not, we're not the entity that that gives the direction to the drafter. We do have clout with the members of the city council, and they respect the opinion of the commission. And so I think that consideration will be given to the recommendations we're making. So I don't think we're spinning our wheels, but we have no guarantee that our recommendations will be adopted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that we have a guarantee that they will at least be transmitted.
Well, they will be transmitted.
I mean, I know that the committee will transmit them to D4, to PS or whoever. I'm just hoping that they will also be then, and we, we don't have anyone from D4 here to tell us that, but that will be also transmitted to the drafter.
Yeah, and I don't know whether maybe we can just figure it out whether or not it would be a violation of the protocol for us to CC the drafter. I don't think that it would be. I think you can CC anybody you want to, but when we get to that point, and I was just texting with Charmaine that I think we probably ought to compile all of the recommendations we have so far into a motion for the October CPP meeting, and then go ahead and forward what we have so far to the city council. And then I don't see a reason why we couldn't CC the drafter. Just like in the past, we CC'd Joan, and Joan emailed us back and said, this is a policy decision. But thank you for the information. Okay, anything else? And so I think we can just continue on. We've gotten two things off of our list, and I think these two issues, D and E, will probably take up most of our time next week. And I did put into the list of future items, which is that included? Oh, you didn't include the last page of the agenda in the PDF, Charmaine, but the list of future items. I made a couple of additions to that, and I mentioned two of them last week. One was, I don't have it in front of me.
I have it in mind.
On my PDF, yeah, my PDF goes to adjourn, then it goes to the next item is the map of investigation related elements, since I don't have the last page of the agenda in my PDF.
Well, I have it on mine, so I can share my screen if you need me to.
Or maybe, oh, I see. My mistake. I was looking. Elena uses the agenda to write the notes, and so that was my mistake. So I was looking at the notes from last week. So my mistake. Yes, and so what I added, the two that I added previously was revisiting the 1-year deadline for officer-involved shootings, where we're not going to be able to investigate within the 1 year. The ability to make recommendations to the city on legislation. And the one that I added this week is the ability of CPP to add other findings to complaints if they're not already added by IA. And so, and that came up during a question that one of the NACOL sessions. And so if we have a complaint and our independent investigation, so we have a complaint that we're required to investigate. Do we have the ability to add other findings to that complaint? And I raised that issue because there was one agency that did not have that ability, and I wanted to make sure that our ordinance included specifically that ability, so it wouldn't be challenged if we did that. Okay, anything else for this week?
Bye, everybody.
Okay, have a good weekend, and we'll see everybody next week, same time, same places. Next week, the last week, we're going to be meeting at 10:30. I'll let you, or do we have one? Or we have 2 more weeks? Well, let me see. NACOL conference ends on the 7th, yeah, and so I think next week will be the last week that we will next week that we'll need to meet at 9:30, and then we can go back to noon the following week.
Oh, good. So I can try to send out the new Zoom links.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Okay.
Bye.